All right. So, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Milk and Honey Distillery.
Sure.
The first Israeli distillery that I know of.
Mhm.
It was cool. I actually heard about it first. My sister is living in Beersheba right now.
Oh, wow.
And her and her boyfriend went to the distillery and got to, I don't know whether it was Tomer they talked to, but they said, like, couldn't be nicer people. Like, it's this amazing little distillery. I'd never heard of it before. And then, like, 6 months later, it shows up with Impex. And I'm like, this is what she was talking about. And it's
Uh-huh.
really, really neat and not particularly old and is doing magical things at that age. So,
Magical. Yeah.
yeah, if you can give me a little background on those two bottles in particular.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so first and foremost, your sister is 100% correct. It's almost oppressive how nice they are. Like they're just lovely people who, and I can't say enough good things about them. So yeah, so Milk and Honey first started in 2015, and that distillery was the last project that Dr. Jim Swan worked on. And obviously, you recognize that name. Some of your listeners or viewers may not. He's the person responsible. I can't speak English. He's the person responsible for getting Kilhoman up and off the ground, helping them to design their whiskeys. He was a whiskey and distillery consultant. He helped Penderyn and Cavalan out of Taiwan, Amoric out of France.
I didn't
Years
realize he
ago,
was
he
with
helped,
Emmark.
yeah. Cotswolds is another one. Years ago, he worked with Glenmorangie and Glengarry. Like he was consulting for years and years and years before he passed away about 2.5 years ago. And so what they needed help with, which is exactly what Kilhoman needed help with at the beginning, was to create a compelling whiskey at a young age. And Milk and Honey had something on their side that Kilhoman didn't, and that's living in a freakishly hot climate. Israel is real. Have you been to Israel?
I've not been yet
You've
myself.
not
No, I
been.
was
Okay.
planning to go this summer,
Uh,
but yeah, here we are.
oh, geez. There we are. Okay. Moment of silence for that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hot climate country. So similar to Kavalan in Taiwan or Amra in India, they have the luxury of being able to put spirit into cask and just let the climate itself um, mature the whiskey in a much faster manner than Scotland would ever see. The unfortunate side effect to that is you're dealing with a much larger angel share. The Scots lose about 2% volume year over year on average, where in Israel, at least their stuff's maturing in Tel Aviv, loses 8 to 11 or 12% angel share year over year. And then they have casks maturing at the Dead Sea,
On top of
and
a
that
hotel,
on
isn't
the top of a hotel
it?
in a chicken wire cage. Um,
Like you do.
like you do, and that's a 25% angel share because that's maturing in the lowest place on earth.
But that whiskey is not in either of the bottles that are
So
in the
it's not.
States right now.
No,
Yeah.
no. So their typical recipe is going to be whiskey matured in Tel Aviv. So it's distilled, matured, and bottled in Tel Aviv. Um, and that's where they're storing, I think, around 3,000 casks right now. They've got quite a big inventory of casks, but all of it's young. I don't think there's anything. I don't think anything has turned 5 yet. Things are
Right.
turning 3 and 4 just now.
And they're
Um,
still one of the things that was fascinating about them. It's like they've got all of this kind of accelerated maturation because of climate, but they're still really strictly sticking to Scotch rules in terms of
100%. Yeah,
3 years makes it a whiskey kind of thing. And
correct. Yeah, correct. So they themselves will not call anything they produce that's less than 3 years and a day old whiskey. They'll call it spirit. And so that's why, if you like the two bottlings you have on your shelf, um, they don't say whiskey, they say whiskey in bloom. And the reason that we did that, so that was I actually came up with that name. We're trying to think of a way to nod to the fact, hey guys, our whiskey is coming. And something about the idea of something being in bloom that says, once this opens up as a flower, it's going to be beautiful. But check it out now. So it was like a nice little, this is almost whiskey. It's not there yet. It's blooming. And so that's how we came up with that idea. So what you have in your store were limited editions. One's just called the double cask and one's called lightly peated. Both of them actually have the same double cask setup. So it's whiskey matured in ex-bourbon cask, and then whiskey matured in something called STR,
Which
which
was a Jim Swan kind
is
of
a Jim
pioneered that.
Swan thing, yeah, which just means that that cask, which they're typically wine casks, have been shaved, toasted, and recharred. So STR, shaved, toasted, recharred. They take out the old char, they toast the casks, they rechar it. So it's kind of like getting new charred oak, but there's still some remnants of what that cask previously held that gives you some of that sweetness coming through. So both bottlings have that. So the double cask is just that, STR and bourbon, but the lightly peated also has some of their whiskey or some of their spirit that was matured in ex Lafroig casks. And so the barley wasn't peated, but using a peated cask gave it some smoky influence, gave that
You're
spirit some smoky influence.
you're allowed to say it's an ex-Lafroig cast.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Just can't print it.
Okay, cool. That's always an interesting rule. But yeah, I mean, this stuff is amazing. I mean, I think like the most fun thing that you could do with this whiskey is pour it for somebody blind and be like, what do you think this is? Because no one would ever guess, one, that it's like 2 years old or so, this stuff is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, just 2 years old.
and also who the heck has had Israeli whiskey? Like,
Yeah, it's I mean, and this was, for me, this was the beauty of discovering Amra and Kavalan, and I mean Chichabu to a lesser extent, though
mm,
they've released some 2-year-old spirit that's you can knock your socks off great, but their climate is not the same as it is with Milk and Honey and Amrit and Kavalan. So tasting some of those Amrits and Kavalans early on, I wasn't drinking it and saying, wow, these guys have potential. I was drinking it and saying, they're already here and it's damn good.
yeah,
And that's how I feel whiskey in bloom is. It's already a delicious whiskey. Is it the most complex thing in the world? I think most whiskeys are not the most complex thing in the world, and they don't necessarily have to be the most complex thing in the world. Is there a lot going on? There most definitely is a lot going on, and there's great notes to pull apart. But I've also tasted some of their 3 and 4-year-old stuff, and it's just like it's just getting better. But it doesn't take away from the fact that their 2-year-old spirit is already, as good as some, Scottish distilleries 10 and 12-year-old whiskey.
I would totally agree. Anything else you want to mention about Milk and Honey, or I think we got that pretty good.
Just that, like I said, the two that you have are limited editions. Once they're gone, they're completely gone. There is a new range of whiskeys from Milk and Honey coming in July. And so there'll be one called the Classic, and then they have their Elements range. And so it'll be Elements peated, Elements sherry, Elements whatever.
Kind of like the Nika distillery bottlings. They're giving you like the pieces of everything that they would make something with
Exactly.
later.
Yeah. Perfect. Yep.
Nice.
But the interesting thing about the Milk and Honey is that their sherried releases, all of them will be kosher certified.
Sure.
And so normally I don't pay too much attention to kosher certified stuff, but I have a lot of friends in the Orthodox community who definitely do, and some that stay away from sherry whiskeys because of that.
Sure.
And this will be the first ever that I can think of kosher certified sherry matured Scotch whiskey or
Yeah.
single malt whiskey.
Right. Because yeah, even Tool, which is known for doing certified kosher stuff, they have their one sherry cask, which is the only thing in their lineup that's not. So
Yeah.
that's neat. I didn't even realize that
Yeah,
was.
they're working with a sherry producer to produce, I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands of liters of sherry. So it's with the sherry producer, a rabbi from Barcelona, and a rabbi from Jerez, I think,
This is like the
to work
beginning of
to,
a really good joke.
right? A rabbi from Barcelona and Jerez walk into a sherry bodega.
They make the most delicious whiskey you've ever
Um,
had.
so that's exciting. I mean, all of their stuff is kosher certified, but the fact that they will have sherry matured kosher certified whiskey, I think is kind of special and something that the world has never seen, which is very cool.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.